date on the process that I used to get through my surgery and the mindset. And I was very much using a plan, prepare, execute, and assess model. And my intention was that when I had the heart attack experience, um, I had already started with a lot of the planning and prep work, um, clearing the deck and making ready for this learning ecosystem anyway. But when the heart attack happened on a Monday, um, I went in and then was released on Wednesday to prepare for pre-op on a Friday, with the surgery to take place on the following Monday. So just 7 days later was the surgery. And then I had 2 days in ICU, and then 2.5 days of recovery in the rehab, cardiac rehab center, and then I was home on that Friday afternoon. Well, that was a 7 day period, uh, basically from pre-op to getting home. So that was 7 days, and I used all of this time in here to plan how I was going to approach the 7 days. And what I elected to do was to do a combination of three things: a modified vision quest, using the principles of Mike Three Bears. I did. I was planning to do a form of NICAN relationship management, a NICAN process, a modified NICAN that has to do with relationships, and it comes from Japanese therapy, and then also a true storytelling um, documentation process of a what we call a living story. And so my intention was to fast for 6 days, and then start eating on that Thursday, so that we could check my function. And during that time, there was no emails, phone, TV, radio, or visitors, except my wife and my daughter. So it was basically a sensory blackout, if you will. I was in essentially a sacred circle, which is a vision quest idea and a true story circle idea. And what you also see in NICAN is that they put you in a room where you just focus on your relationships, and a learning journal. And so in that story space, I was awake about 20 to 22 hours a day, because they're always waking you up, and I didn't sleep much. And in that time, I was basically going through an iterative process of reviewing people, places, events, memories, and doing it in the form of a true story stage that looks very much like a living theater. And so, in the true story idea, what you do is you create there's sort of an audience out here, and then all the members of my life and influences, essentially you create an invitation for them to just show up, and then periodically they're going to come up on stage and have an interaction with me. And in that, I'm going to answer the three questions that are in the NICAN process. So in that exchange, there's three questions. There is, what have they done for me? What have they given me in my life? Two is, what have I done for them? And number three, what problems have I caused them? You don't ask what problems they have caused you, because most of our waking life outside of this process, you're accusing other people. So those three questions, you basically have people would essentially come up on the stage, and I would go through those three questions, and I would have a little note sheet of all the things of insights that happened from there, and then things that I wanted to sustain, improve, and then act on. And so those actions were going to go to a giant to-do list. And then when that person was done, the next person would come up, and I would kind of... Now, some people came up and it was multiple opportunities to go deeper and deeper, because you can only do so much of that at a time. And when it's done, so you move on to the next thing. And so I used the Nightcan process to help me with the people in my life. I used a vision quest process of surrender, empty, nothing, and love to basically accept everything outside of my circle and my bowl, to be aware of it, to acknowledge it just as it is, and then to accept it, and then to empty the bowl in the form of things that I need to do or account for, things I want to sustain and improve. So you can actually do that in the Vision Quest. You're doing that with events, which is a combination of people, places, and things. And so decompressing and analyzing major events from my memory. And so on that big stage, there's elements of the past, present, and future. And so those events and planned events, all of those events come in, and you go through that process and sustains, improves, and actions, and you keep making this list of things that I got to do, and I think that I should do based on values and judgment. And a memory audit. And so you just keep going around and around and around on this. And so I did that from essentially Friday night all the way through the surgery and the rehab and ICU, and I'm on drugs and all that stuff. And I spent 100% of my time going through that and building up this mental imagery of this storyboard. And that storyboard in my mind looks very much like this. This is just my first rough sketch of this thing. And so this is, it's interesting as you start going through this, that what you see yourself in a number of different roles simultaneously. There's the me, who is the stage director of what's going on the play. There's also the me, the self, who's on the stage with these people as they come up to talk to me or the events. There's the me who's watching the before, the during, the beyond, and who's taking notes. And so there's a certain simultaneity of being in the play and of the play and beyond the play. And as you're going through those iterations and creating those memories and making sense and doing your to-do list, each of those little events gets posted up here on the big stage wall behind. And I want you to think of that as a 3-dimensional or 4-dimensional space of infinite memory that's perfect. So as I would deprocess or deconstruct a story, it would become that, or a person. And then it just goes up there on the poster board as part of the living story. And then you start seeing relationships and themes developing between people and stories and events. And that becomes, when you see a new theme, that becomes something that can get pulled down from the storyboard and go deeper. So I want you to think of this as a 4-dimensional space. So it's 3 dimensions plus time, and you have an infinite space, and you have all this space in here so that as you come up with new ideas, there's always room for the next most important things. So this auditor or the scribe has the job of not forgetting anything, so that while the director's directing and the stage manager's managing and the self that is engaging in the play and the artist who's scripting that and the one who's monitoring the world inside and outside of what's going on, the scribe is doing the true storyboard of keeping all of this stuff as a loose, collaborative, iterative work in progress, a living story that has live edges. So each story, you end up realizing, has a living edge to it, and it is making connections as it goes. Every time it gets told, that story is a living thing that's going out and making other connections. And then sometimes you actually notice when those connections happen, and then each connection now creates a potential for an examination of how story one and story two connect. So that's essentially what my 6.5 days in the fast was going through, was building out this giant storyboard. Well, what I noticed was that on the Friday morning, the last Friday of my 5 days, so Monday was the surgery, and then Tuesday and Wednesday was the ICU, and then Thursday and Friday, half a day Wednesday, and then Thursday. At 2:30 in the morning on Friday, I had exhausted all of this. Like, there was a part of me that said I had done all the work to a deep level, and that it was time to start thinking about the beyond. What should I be doing with all those notes that are on the to-do list? And then you need values, which were clarified through all of this, of who I am and what I stand for. Helps you now develop the priority list of the things that I'm going to do, and then those become SMART goals, and then those become lines of effort and projects. Part of that were things I'm going to do with the business, with my teaching, with my coaching, with my family, with the people I have relationships with, all of those things. So from about 2:30 to 6:30, I couldn't have slept if I tried to, and those 4 hours became the intention of what to do when I left to go home at noon. It was really coming up with all of the stated intentions, driven by the process of love. According to Mike Three Bears, in the Vision Quest, surrender, empty, and nothing. And then when you do act with full autonomy and integrity, let love be the guiding principle that overarches everything. So that informed all of the things that I intend to do, and then that helped me put together, an action plan for the various things that I've been working on, and all of that kind of fits inside this living story in the evolution of that storyboard as it goes forward, because that hard right edge is a living thing. That's continuing to, all of those little stories are growing forward together with that self. So as you go walking forward in a true story way, you are accompanied by your stories. They are an extension of you and part of you, because every one of those stories that you are a part of, other people are a part of it, and that has real energy out to the ends of the universe. So that's what I wanted to say about I'm calling this, I was trying to come up with a name for it. The best that I have so far, tentatively, is I'm just calling this Life Audit Theater. That seems to be the thing that best describes so far what it is that what I was doing. Again, it's a combination of that modified Vision Quest, the Nikan philosophy, and the true storytelling accountability, accompanied by sort of the intermittent fasting and and the setup and the prep to do all of that. The fasting seemed to be a really important part. It was very good for the physical challenges. What I can tell you is that the actual medical procedure to me was actually a piece of cake. There was not a single moment from preparing for the pre-op and going through the pre-op and coming home. There was not a single moment in there where I experienced any stress or anxiety or concern about the open heart surgery. Because I had genuinely surrendered to the process, and I knew what it was that I was going to do with my intention on those 3 lines of activity. And then the medical stuff was beyond my control, and so whatever that was going to be, that was going to be. So I surrendered to that being what it was, and I just concentrated on the vision quest, the Nican, and the storytelling, and then that brought me to the current state. So I had a really good discussion yesterday with my surgeon. I had a 30-minute meeting with him. We probably spent 2 minutes talking about my actual status, and about 28 minutes about this process, because he noticed that I was kind of an unusual case in his experience, and he was very interested and we had a lot of good personal conversations beyond the medical as well. So I'm going to turn this into a paper and a presentation for this year's annual True Storytelling Conference, and try to share some of this in order to give respect to Mike Three Bears, who taught me what I know about vision questing. And by applying his teachings in this way and sharing that with him, I feel like I'm honoring his teachings to me by showing how I am applying it and then asking for his feedback. And I kept him apprised of what it was I was doing, and he thought it was a good idea. And his first guidance to me was keep your heart beating throughout that whole process. So I followed his guidance on that. And then I'll share the true storytelling stuff with David Boji. And then the Nikan philosophy is a hat tip to the Japanese psychologists back in the late 1800s who put together the principles of that practical Zen approach to relationship management for practical people. So I just wanted to summarize that with you, and I wanted to get my first and my worst sketch of what it was like, to have the audience, the boundary between the audience and the stage, stage left and stage right, and then the whole backdrop of that 4-dimensional place where, as each living story was being conducted and completed, it would then go up and get posted, and that was part of that scribe's artifact of how to document that whole process of what it was that I was doing. Now, in a certain way, Brian, this is part of the answer that I wanted to give you about what it means to be a student and to have an ecosystem approach to learning. If there is a set of teachable skills that are in our job book and in our professional body of knowledge, there's sort of the obligation of the student is to start going through those things and maintaining, your little grade book or your job book. That's book number 2, by the way. The job book of all those different skills, and self-assessing, and having your own personally approved pathway through that body of knowledge that's based on your self-assessment of your own goals, objectives, your skills, and all the resources that you bring. And then that means that the professional body of knowledge, the PBOK, plus the teachers and guides, act as resources in your own self-development journey. So I'm going to share with you ideas about what, practical tips that I've learned about how to accelerate that learning, You'll see that in the Cornell note sheets, the model of the watch one, do one, teach one approach, the practitioner's approach to craft knowledge that we've adopted, and you have been doing a great job with, the nightly podcast and posting your charts to get the feedback, and you adopting your own coaching eye. So if you take to heart some of my earlier comments tonight about developing the coaching eye, that was actually part of the answer to your question in an indirect kind of a way. And then this little discussion tonight is me trying to demonstrate how I, on a personal level, am trying to incorporate in this living process the teachings of three really important people for me. Mike Three Bears as the Vision Quest, the Nikan philosophy guys, David Boji's True Storytelling, really Jason Fung for intermittent fasting on the physical side of all this stuff. So and then what I've learned, from soccer coaching and whatever. But this is really me trying to document and create an artifact and document a process that shows how I'm incorporating all of these lessons in the same way that I recommend that you take the professional body of knowledge of trading and adopt that kind of practitioner's approach. Just to complete the idea, what I noticed was that as the director and the scribe, that even though I was scheduling and organizing and conducting all this stuff, there was a part of me who was also looking to arrange and align and integrate as new memories would occur and new people would show up from that story, I just remembered I need to invite that person. So this audience was a dynamic thing, which was a function of the things and places I visited as a result of doing the on-stage work. That I was doing directing and casting and scribing and engaging, and I was interpreting the meaning of those stories, and I was witnessing it, and I was participating as a member of the cast, and I was documenting it up here. So there were a lot of different pieces and parts of me that were going on throughout all of this. I came to see that the living and growing storyboard of past, present, and future, which had that time dimension and as well as depth, was really a place where I was developing the interpretive context. So as each new story would be completed and found its way up here, there was a part of me that was looking to make connections from each new story to all the previous stories. Night and day and infinite stories and focus stories, a sense of the infinite, all the spaces and places, the little story chunks and clumps and themes. All of that was happening. And so the folks and the things that appeared on the stage, people, events, themes, and settings, I thought of all of this stuff as sort of like scenes from a life. And I was noticing the idea of pathways and story circles, so that as story circles would get documented, then the pathways that you take sort of defines the relationship between them. You start stitching together this life mosaic of pieces and parts, which then begin to gel, and then as you get new scraps and new pieces, they just find a natural place, and you learn to build out that storyboard as you go, as it is becoming, right? And so it's iterative, it's dynamic, it incorporates both thinking and feeling, a lot of listening to the individuals who are on the stage telling you their stories. And there's sense making and note taking, so all of that is going on in this process of a living story, mosaic I would call it, and this becomes a growing artifact that has a live edge to it. That boundary is expanding, and it's sticky, and other people and their stories that you haven't even met yet are coming together, and it's in that network, that social network, where we're continuing to live and grow. So I wanted to share those things with you about where I am, and at least create that initial artifact, and so that I could listen to how it sounded when I go back and replay it later, and share it with others. But I'm pretty happy with the way it sounded in my ear. It felt very natural and correct, and so that's where we are right now. So I have us at 8:10. I want to close up right now and get this start to get processed, and I'll post this. And again, I'll be open to your questions as we continue to go. And I'll see some of you guys here shortly in the nightly podcast. But keep up the great work. You guys are doing a great job, and appreciate you giving me time and space to go off the beaten path a little bit. How does all this connect to trading? It absolutely does, because it connects to everything else that you do. And if you're serious about trading, then you treat it the same way that you treat all the other things in your life that you respect, and there is a relationship with all the things that you decide to do as you go. So take good care, and we shall see you shortly.